control the exposure. Okay, they are formed automatically. The people select themselves as exposed and non-exposed by choosing to either smoke or not smoke, or to drink or not drink. Okay, it's the individual's decision, and so the investigator does not control exposure, and so they are called as observational studies. We looked at detail in a case control study, and we saw that the case control study was the first approach to test a causal hypothesis. And we saw the distinctive features, and you must remember, especially this picture, this diagram here, as to how we select cases first from a population using a case definition. And then once we have chosen the cases, then we select the controls either pairwise or as a group. We do matching and we select controls who are appropriate so that they are similar to cases in all respects except for the fact that they do not have the disease, which is what we are looking at. And then among the cases, we see how many of them are exposed to a particular factor, and then we see among the controls how many are exposed. And then we look at what is the exposure rates between these two. And we have seen that in a case control study, the main information that we get is the odds ratio. Now, ideally, when we want to understand risk of disease, when you're exposed to a certain factor, you would like to calculate the relative risk. And the risk is similar to your probability, but because of the limitations of a case control study, because we do not follow up these group of people or a period of time, we are just taking cases and controls. So the best thing that we can do is to find an approximate value for the relative risk, and this is called as the odds ratio. And the odds compares the odds of exposure in cases to the odds of exposure in controls. Before I go ahead, some student has their mic on and I can hear that. Could you please see all students? Can you see that you have muted yourself? I hope all students have muted themselves. Students, please ensure that your mic is on mute. Nandini, your mic is not muted. Can you please say that your mic is muted? Come from within the group itself. So when you choose a group of doctors, you can have people who smoke or you don't smoke. You can have a group of people who are sedentary and those who are not sedentary. You can have a group of people. So you can have that is called as internal comparison. If there is no internal comparison within your group, then you can choose an external comparison. Or in the event where it's difficult to find a comparative group, you can compare with the rates in the general population. Now follow-up, because a cohort study is a follow-up study, it's very important that we carry the follow-up very well. So a rule of thumb is that 90% of those who you enroll in the study should remain throughout the period of the study. Okay, and that is called as a good quality cohort study. So the rule of thumb for completeness and non-participation rates is that you should be able to retain at least 90% of those whom you have enrolled. Okay, if it is less than that, then there has been a little laxity on the part of the investigators. All the subjects, people pay more attention, investigators pay more attention to those who have been exposed rather than the non-exposed. And so you can get some people who are developing the condition, but because you have neglected it, you're not picking it up. Therefore, you must ensure that whatever you're doing to determine whether the person has disease or not, whatever tests, investigation are being carried out, it should be the same for both those who are exposed as well as non-exposed. Okay, that is, you have to be careful about that bias. Then you must also say how many visits, how many times are you going to follow up? If your study is going to last for 10 years, then how often are you going to see these people? Is it going to be every year, or initially is it going to be for every couple of months and then follow up? So you must decide all of that. Then what are the reasons for additional evaluations? How are you going to do follow-up? Is it going to be an active follow-up where you are reaching out to the participants, or you wait for them to come with a problem? Okay, so whenever the investigator reaches out, it's an active follow-up, and when you wait for the participants to come to you, that will be a passive. So passive surveillance, you can look at hospital, disease registries, you can look at clinic, physician offices, you can use surveillance systems. These are all very well set, especially in the high income countries. You have a national death index, you have reportable conditions, you have notificable diseases which have to be notified. Okay, so you can do that by looking at surveillance if you're taking a known population, or you can carry out active surveillance by looking at regular time intervals. You can carry out systematic evaluation. Okay, for example, if you're following a group of women for cervical cancer, then you carry out either a pap smear examination if you have the funds, or if you don't have that much funds, then you can even do use a speculum to look at the for the cervix. Okay, so you can do, depending on how much funds you have, what type of evaluation you want to do, you can choose. Okay. Now it's very important whether you're doing active or passive, whoever is evaluating the subject, they should be blinded to the exposed status. So they should not know that whether they're looking at a person who's had the exposure or not the exposure. So blinding is very important in order to reduce the observer bias. Now, once you have selected all of this, you carry it up and you follow them up for a long period of time, then what you do is you gather data in terms of how many person years of observation you have. Okay, so that's very important, because in a cohort study, you don't enroll everybody at the same time. So normally in a cohort study, they keep a year or a few months in order to enroll the participants into the study. So because you're not enrolling everyone at the same time, and also because people may drop out, you have to know when you enroll the person and how long they have done. So you will get person years. So the denominator in a cohort study is person years. Then you will also look at what is the incidence rate. What is the number of new cases which are occurring in this population? So you will get incidence of disease both among the exposed and the non-exposed. And because we are getting incidence of disease here, we can calculate two very important measures of risk, which is known as relative risk and attributable risk. Okay, so this is the framework of a cohort study, as you've seen in a 2x2 table. You begin and you're looking at exposures. So the risk factor is present in a particular group and risk factor is absent. And then you're looking at the disease occurrence, whether it's yes or no. Okay, and we have seen what ABCD means. And now you can calculate incidence rate. So among the exposed group, incidence is A upon A plus B, and incidence among the not exposed group is C upon C plus D. Okay, so you have got two rates of incidence. You have incidence among exposed and you have incidence among non-exposed. So what you do with this is you can now calculate the relative risk. So the relative risk is the ratio of the incidence of the disease among exposed and the incidence among the non-exposed. Okay, and this is a very important index that tells you about the strength of association between the exposure and the outcome. Now, how do we interpret the relative risk? If relative risk is 1, the risk is in exposed is equal to the risk in the non-exposed. So we can conclude that there is no plausible association between exposure and outcome. So if the occurrence of disease is similar in both the groups, that means this particular exposure is not responsible for the disease. If relative risk is more than 1, then the risk in exposed is greater than the risk in non-exposed. So there is a positive association which could be causal in nature. If the relative risk is less than 1, then the risk in exposed is less than the risk in the non-exposed. So then there is a negative association between exposure and outcome, which could be protective in nature. Okay, so relative risk is one of the most important measures of risk. So what is the risk? If you want to ask the question, if a person smokes cigarette, what is the risk of his developing lung cancer? That is answered by estimating the relative risk. Okay, so now I have a simple example for you here. We have some people, a group of children who swim in the kiddie pool, and then there's a group of children who do not swim in the kiddie pool. And then you want to see how many children got giardiasis when they swam in the pool and how many children who did not swim in the pool got giardiasis. Okay, so as you can see here, the incidence is around 16 children who swam in the pool. Okay, 16 children out of a total of 124 children, they got giardiasis. Now 355 children did not use the pool, but among them 14 children also got giardiasis. Okay, so what is the relative risk here? So this is how we compare. Okay, so how many times? So the relative risk was 12.9% in those who were exposed. And among those who were not exposed, it was 3.9%. Okay, so how did we get that? 16 out of 124, A upon A plus B. Okay, and C upon C plus D. So similarly, we have got here 12.9% and 3.9%. As you can see, the pie is, the piece of cake is larger in the upper group, in the exposed group, and it is smaller in the non-exposed group. So relative risk, it's called as relative risk because you're comparing the risk of disease among those who are exposed to those who are non-exposed. So here we get a number of 3.3. How do we interpret this number of 3.3? We can say that the risk of giardiasis was 3.3 times greater in persons who swam in the kiddie pool as compared to those who did not. So that means obviously that this kiddie pool was not treated, it was contaminated and it needs to be disinfected. Okay, so this is how we estimate. So what is the risk of giardiasis for those who are swimming in that pool? It is almost 3 times more as compared to those who do not swim. Okay, so that is the first measure of risk, which is the relative risk. And relative risk is a measure of the strength of association between exposure and outcome. Okay. Now, if we ask another question, how much of the disease that occurs can be attributed to a certain exposure? For example, now let's take, okay, we saw giardiasis. How much of giardiasis can be attributed to swimming? Okay, if we put it the other way around, how much of lung cancer can be attributed to smoking? Okay, so that the first time when we look at relative risk, we were asking if someone smokes, what is their risk of developing a disease? Now we are asking how much of lung cancer can be attributed to smoking? Okay, how much of the disease can be attributed to a certain exposure? So the attributable risk is defined as the amount or proportion of disease incidence or risk that can be attributed to a specific exposure. Okay, so how do we calculate attributable risk? Relative risk is a ratio, attributable risk is a subtraction. Okay, so incidence among exposed minus incidence among non-exposed divided by the incidence among the exposed will give us the attributable risk, and therefore attributable risk is also known as the risk difference. If you subtract the two risks, you will get attributable risk. Okay, now let's see and understand what this is. Just look at we have 3 graphs. Okay, so let us look at A. Okay, so if you're looking at the level of risk among those who are exposed, can you see there is a certain level of risk? There's a block, a green block, right? Now, among those who are exposed, we can understand that disease is occurring. But if you look at those who are not exposed, there is a certain level of disease even occurring among them. Okay, so the level of risk, as you can see, it is lower, but it is present. So even if you're exposed, there is a certain amount of risk. Even if you're not exposed, there is a background amount of risk. So how do we know what is the excess amount of risk? You subtract this background risk. Can you see here in the graph B? When you subtract the background risk from the exposed group, then you will find that there is an extra amount of risk, okay, which we can say is because of the particular exposure. Okay, so now when you look in graph C, you can see that there are two blocks there. That green block has been divided into a green block, and then it's become a shaded color of blue. Okay, that blue one indicates the excess risk which is associated with the exposure, and that is the attributable risk. Okay. Now we have another concept which is known as the population attributable risk. Now this population attributable risk, it is the incidence of disease in the total population minus the incidence of disease in the non-exposed population. Okay. Now why do we want to know this? Now we know that there's a very strong lobby that is working towards a ban on smoking. Okay. So if we were, suppose we were to ban smoking, what will be the reduction in lung cancer? What will be the reduction in the mortality rate? Okay, so if you want to understand what will be the public health impact, suppose we were to ban smoking. Okay, so to understand that, it would be interesting to know what is the population attributable risk. So what is the incidence of disease in the total population minus the incidence of disease in the non-exposed population? That will provide an estimate of the amount by which the disease could be reduced. So if we ban smoking and we don't allow people to smoke, then how much of lung cancer is occurring in the total population and how much of lung cancer is occurring in those who don't smoke? Okay, so when we subtract that, we will then get to know how much of an impact will a ban on tobacco make a difference to the occurrence of lung cancer. Okay, so this population attributable risk, it provides an estimate of the amount by which disease could be reduced. It will also help us to understand what is the impact of a program in reducing the problem. Okay. So this is another example here for you just to calculate a relative risk. And here the exposure